Okay, are you ready?
I believe it's recording and transcribing, so I think we should be good.
Well, I want to thank Jessica, first of all, for taking care of the meeting last time. Thank you so much, Jessica. Appreciate you stepping up and doing that. And I want to welcome everybody to our meeting. And I want you to know that I've taken my Tums this morning in lieu of the heartburn. Hopefully we won't have any heartburn. Be ready for those pain points, as you guys put it so clearly. And I do appreciate the discussions. I know that we're working through some things, and I have found that everybody is willing to work together, and I appreciate that. So we need to go to 3.3 to start off with, and just let's review that. I believe that's where we had some things to add, and I hopefully everybody has looked at 3.3, but let's just look at it. Jim, if you don't mind to pull that up.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I shared the wrong screen, so let me stop sharing that one.
Right.
And try and share the right screen.
Let's see.
Sorry, it's not. Okay, I think. Hold on just a second. It for some reason it's not recognizing the second screen that is in the room, and it only wants to share a single window instead of the entire thing. So let me try again.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's right now is only sharing the one draft. Is that correct for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think if we want to go back, and so right now draft 1 is the one that we've primarily been working from. If anybody wants to go over to draft 2, I can do that, but I don't think it's going to let me, for some reason. I'm not really sure. It let me do it last time. It's not going to let me share them on the same screen. It doesn't look like.
Okay. Can you scroll down to 3.3 for us, Jim?
Sure.
There we go.
Let me see also if I can make it a little bit bigger. Sorry, Adam. Okay, is that big enough for folks to be able to see?
I think so. We just need you. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, sorry, it's very sensitive and wants to bounce around a little bit.
Okay. All right. This has been, well, it doesn't look like it has been. It looks like it coordinate, communicate, inform with the F&A work on this more. Do we have any additions to 3.3? Or do we need to start here and work on this further?
Yeah, I believe, sorry, let me scroll up really quickly. Yeah, so the 3.3 is, we had talked a little bit about that, but at the last meeting, but the group hadn't really decided exactly what they wanted. And so these are notes that I put in from last time.
Okay.
So we can circle back to that, Terry, if you want, or the group can get more into defining 3.3.
Yeah, from what my notes from listening to the conversation, we wanted to add something about the working relationship. Okay, and do we want to add this here? And I heard, I think Tracy say we were hoping for 2 sentences to just clarify, because this VT manages AmeriCorps subgrants, training, and disability outreach funded through federal grants from the Corporation for National Community Service. And then further, VT serves as a statewide advocate for community service. Okay, so is everyone okay with those 2 sentences so far?
And Terry, I think if I remember correctly,
Okay.
kind of where we left off the discussion is up above. This section is called responsibility of parties, and for the part for finance and administration, it outlines kind of some bullet point things of specifically what the department is going to do to support Volunteer Tennessee. And then this 3.3 talks generally about what Volunteer Tennessee as a commission is responsible for doing, but doesn't really address its responsibilities back to FNA.
Okay.
Which I think is where we kind of left off the discussion of.
Okay.
Should the commission's responsibilities back to FNA be bullet pointed and defined a little bit more? If people are happy with the 2 sentences above, we can strike the 2, and those were the 2 bullet points that are there are just notes that I captured from the discussion last time. But if people are happy with what's already up in 3.3, I can strike that and the group can move on. It's really up to you all in terms of if you want to spell out a little bit more what the commission is going to, what responsibilities the commission has back to FNA.
I'm trying to raise my hand.
Betty, do you have a question?
No, but one thing I think I recall from the last meeting is that we started defining specifics, and then we said, if we do that, then we might leave something out, or we might be adding something. And so maybe we want to just make it general so that we do have a lot of specific responsibilities, and we were adjusting those. And then I think Tracy had the suggestion of, let's have a 2-sentence description that will cover it all so that we have some flexibility.
Mm-hmm. So the first sentence describes.
So I think the 2 sentences were fine. I think what was supposed to be worked on was bullet points outlining what Volunteer Tennessee's kind of responsibilities back to FNA were. So I think that's the piece that was supposed to be kind of hashed out, and that's what the bullets were for. If my memory is serving me correctly. Because the above, it's FNA's responsibilities to Volunteer Tennessee, but there's nothing really saying what Volunteer Tennessee's responsibilities back to FNA are.
Okay.
Is that in a lower section somewhere?
Possibly.
Yes, and that's something Sarah pointed out as well. So we could always just say, please see section.
It should all be captured under 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you could do a reference to, a sentence that says, Volunteer Tennessee, you wordsmith it, but Volunteer Tennessee's responsibilities to FNA are further captured in section 4, or to Adam's point, you can pull that up into here either way. But it sounds like, and I think it felt like it was probably captured in the document as a whole.
Okay.
So.
How does everybody feel about taking these 2 bullet points out and removing what we've, strike through in this paragraph and addressing specifics, or maybe even moving it down to make sure that this is covered in the 4.0 and following 4.0?
Could you scroll down a little bit so that I can see the rest of the previous paragraph?
Sorry,
the 3.3, 3.3. Right. Yes, I had Volunteer Tennessee manages AmeriCorps subgrants, training, disability outreach. Funded through federal grants from the Corporation for National Community Service. Okay. And then what is the second sentence? I keep hearing there are two sentences there.
Further, Volunteer Tennessee serves as a statewide advocate for community service.
Okay, because I see that and it was kind of in purple here as opposed to being in black. So that was what I had.
Because we added it.
Right.
I'm fine with removing the two bullets, especially since the specifics are outlined in section 4.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Did you all want to add something similar to what Eugene was talking about earlier that says something along the lines of C, whatever it is, 4 point, whatever? Or are people happy with the way it's worded?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. I'm rereading this. I was trying to pull it up so I could scroll on my own instead of making you do it and have everybody get
It's
busy.
okay, yeah.
I'm wondering if this section was intended to capture, so it had what FNA was doing for
Mhm.
the commission, and then this is what the Volunteer Tennessee office, the VT, not the commission. So Jim and team does as a part of FNA. And then it starts to go into the chair's responsibilities. So that's back to the commission's responsibilities in part. So I wonder if we make a reference to that in addition to the reference on further operating procedures are captured in section 4. So, sorry, to clarify, to the point that we were discussing last time of, we've captured what FNA does for Volunteer Tennessee, the commission. I'm rereading this now, wondering if the intent of this was, this is what the Volunteer Tennessee staff do and carry out and execute really on behalf of FNA and the commission.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna put back the 2 things I just deleted. Because what we discussed a little bit at the last meeting was more from the commission perspective. So, because it starts out with, it's got the chair and vice chair speak for the commission, then it talks about what the commission in general does, and then coordinate with FNA. That was just something I stuck in there, and then coordinate with the FNA program director in planning meetings. So it was, I think the intent was more in line with
The commission.
what does the commission itself have to do, kind of similar to these things that are bullet pointed out here, up here, for what FNA is doing for the commission. But it sounds like, for the most part, people are happy just with the 2 sentences that are there and then referring back to the operating procedures that are further down.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
And if that's the case, then I can just kind of redelete these things. Okay, for some reason it is then, it wants to. Okay. I think it's now got the 3.3 is that section, but
Okay.
for some reason it was trying to make it under 3.2.
Okay. So we're good with 3.3, or do we want to add what Adam just suggested? terms of-
I retract it.
Okay.
Okay.
Did anybody want to add something, kind of Eugene's suggestion of C, whatever it is, 4 point whatever for?
Maybe that's a good last bullet in this section. I don't know how many are past 3.4.
Let's see,
Just
so
one
it's
more.
got the chair's responsibilities, vice chair's responsibilities, and then all other duties, responsibility are outlined in, the executive order.
I think we could do a 3.7. Other general operating procedures are captured in section 4. Something to that effect. That's what you were kind of saying, right?
I mean, if we wanted to, or
Operating procedures between the parties are captured in section 4.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And let's see, just section 4, because that's,
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
okay.
Good.
Okay,
Okay, so can we go ahead and move on to 3.4?
Mhm.
Okay, so the chair of VT's responsibilities include preside over all meetings of the commission, appoint all committee chairs, assist all chairs in the planning of committee activities, supervise all chairs as to the management of committee plans, authorize and execute the wishes of the board, call all quarterly meetings and special meetings, and be an ex officio member of all committees. Do we need to add anything to this?
Terry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Tracy.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I have a couple of questions. One, the outline of the chair's responsibilities is outlined either in the executive order or in VT bylaws,
Mhm.
and which the chair must follow. I don't understand the necessity of having this responsibility outlined again
Mhm.
in this document, and
Mhm.
what it brings to this document that the executive order and VT bylaws don't bring.
It's in my opinion, and I may be wrong, but I believe the purpose of this document is to spell out the working relationship that we have with
Right.
F&A. So here, maybe instead of repeating what's in our executive order or bylaws, it should state how I work together or how the chair works together with VT.
Yes.
That would be more
Yeah.
appropriate.
Yeah, F&A. Yeah, the VT
F&A,
and
sorry,
F&A.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know. And I think we've already got some of that where the chair, can speak for the board
Mhm.
to F&A, and is the voice of the board. Is that somewhere? That's already in this document somewhere.
yeah, it's
Yes,
up in
it is.
3.2.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I would add just one clarifier that I think part of it is important to capture. I'm good with some of those edits that we're kind of brainstorming out loud, but I think part of it is good to capture here because the commission can change its bylaws to have the chair or vice chair have different responsibilities as they deem fit, which I think is appropriate. I think it's important to capture here at minimum what we expect those responsibilities to be in case those bylaws do shift. I agree, it in large part it is restating what's in the EO, but I think we could add to it or combine it with what we've already said in terms of speak on behalf of the commission, et cetera. But I do think it's important that we don't just rely on what's in the bylaws, as that can change.
Okay. Then I think we need to add a statement in here that focuses back on the bylaws, that these things could change as the bylaws change. Because preside over meetings of the commission I don't understand what F&A would need some of these bullet points for, to point all chair committees. That's already defined. So I'm just not, I see your point about the bylaws changing because that's always a possibility. And, but
Again, I think I come back
but
to
which
point-
of these are responsibilities that the chair has to F&A specifically?
I think that is part of the point is we have had some role uncertainty as to what the chair's responsibility is with the staff. And if I were looking at this and stating it, the chair's responsibilities are with the commission, as the EOs say, and as your current bylaws say. I think it's important to restate it here. They really don't go beyond that.
Okay, so if your issue is with staff, what are those particular things? Because the chair does have to interact with the staff and the executive director. I mean,
Sure.
you know, so what specifically are you asking or wanting from the chair in their interactions with F&A? You know,
Yeah,
because
and
they're
maybe maybe again, that's captured in section 4 better. And maybe these are muddying the waters between these two, but specifically to your point, I would say, over the last year and kind of how some of this came to be was that, again, there was role uncertainty of, does the chair manage the executive director and vice versa, not vice versa,
Right.
but does the chair manage the executive director? If I'm looking at these list of responsibilities, the answer is no. In our operating procedures, there is clear expectations that F&A will work with the chair to seek feedback on and incorporate that feedback of the executive director in their performance process. But I think, again, going back to the specifics, it's what's been discussed at a few commission meetings of, and I think you were one of the ones that said it, of F&A is overstepping in how we manage the executive director when that is not a responsibility of the chair anywhere.
Well, now in the bylaws, it does state in the bylaws that the chair is supposed to do the evaluation. And I think, I hope that, none of this states anything about that, so the bylaws do state that. And I think that together, because we do fund half the staff, BT does federally fund half the staff and half the executive director's position, and the state funds the other half. So I think there are two viewpoints, and that in the evaluation of the executive director's position, it's very important for both of those things to be heard and to be valued from both perspectives. And I don't think this. I don't get the continuation that that just because it's not listed here, that somehow the chair does not have any responsibility towards the management of the executive director, because we would have to have some to be able to ask the executive director to do those things that the commission deems that it needs to do to fulfill its mission. And we don't need to go through F&A to be able to ask the executive director to do those things. So I
Have you
don't
looked
think,
at section 4.9? Can we scroll down maybe? Because I think a lot of what you're saying,
Yeah.
is captured right there. I realize we're going this section by section instead of whole document, but just fast forward us along to try and make this a little more efficient with the use of everyone's time.
Yeah, I think what you just said is hopefully captured in 4.9 to Eugene's point about how all of that will unfold and the spirit of how the assistant commissioner over this group works with the chair to solicit that feedback and hear that feedback, agree, et cetera. But I come back to, you asked for a specific on why does this need to be listed? There have, over the last year and a half, been confusion between who manages the staff. And I would say, I hear you and that is in your bylaws, but that is not what F&A agrees to. I think that's why it's important that it's in an MOU document to clarify what is the responsibility, because we didn't have a chance to, provide feedback. Well, maybe Buddy did on the bylaws. I don't know, but the way it's listed in the bylaws, I would say is something that F&A doesn't agree to.
Well, no, I don't know what Buddy provided feedback on, because the bylaws, as far as I can tell, that section about the chair supervising the executive director and doing the performance review had been in the bylaws for almost 30 years. So it's not like it was added some point later. As far as I can tell, it's been there all along. But certainly Buddy would have been aware the last time the commission changed its bylaws, which I think was in 2008 or 9, to add and all it did at that time, as far as I remember, was just to add the audit committee. I think was the only change that was made at that time. But certainly Buddy would have been around and involved in that process.
Yeah, and I think 4.9 probably captures what Buddy and the previous chairs have been doing for many years.
No, but not really, because the Buddy and I did not have a supervisee relationship. All of my management was done by the chair. My performance review was done by the chair, and then Buddy just would put that into the online system. He would take comments and just verbatim just put them into the system.
Got it.
So it really did follow what was in the bylaws, where the chair was my supervisor, and just because the chair is not a state employee, they don't have access to that online system. And we looked into potentially giving the chair access to that, and we were told, it wouldn't really work to have a non-state employee have access to that system just for the purposes of putting in performance review stuff. And so it was better to just kind of keep doing what we had done in the past with having Buddy just enter those comments.
Eugene, I want you to weigh in here. I'm happy to lean in and say I've been part of the problem the past year and a half of I have a different interpretation of how that should be done. And I know I've had the conversation of, if Volunteer Tennessee reports to me and, Jim, that's you now. I don't plan to only be a pass through for somebody else's comments. Like if somebody is in my reporting structure, I plan to manage them as I do every other employee. I can't speak for how Buddy did it. So yeah, I mean, that probably has changed over the last 2 years. And probably why a good bit of this needed to be revisited and ironed out some. But I think where we have had a distinct difference of opinion, if you will, is that regardless of what's in the bylaws or what's been done for 30 years, the chair has no authority over a state employee because they're an F&A state employee under our hiring jurisdiction. So I think that is, again, kind of the crux of a lot of what needed to be ironed out in some of this. And Terry, I know you and I have talked about some of that as well, but I think that is where some of the value comes in of clearly stating who does what and whose responsibility is whose in this document, is because I think that's where there's been some confusion over the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Or year and a half or whatever it's been.
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to raise my hand? If I could add something here, I have notes. I always operate on paper as well as on the computer because I actually read better by paper, probably my age. I apologize for that. But anyway, and I have notes in 2 different places on my draft from our last meeting that I have the words in tandem, that the chair of Volunteer Tennessee works in tandem with the program director of FNA. And so I think there's some reason I have that. I also have a note that says, add a note about the working relationship. And so that it's not like all or one in either way, but these 2 positions, the intent is that the chair works directly with the executive director of Volunteer Tennessee. At the same time, FNA is the employer and the state is the employer. So both parties need to have input in that process, and it's not one or the other.
Yeah, and there's a comment on the right side that Adam added that of what he's talked with Terry about, and that's why that was added, is because we talked about that last time.
Yeah, and thank you, Jessica, for reminding us of that. I added as a comment because I didn't want to just insert it. I think there probably needs to be some discussion on, does this flow need to be further explained in 4.9 or a separate, or I put it as a comment instead of taking the liberty of just writing it into the document, because I think that is where we kind of ended some of the last discussion of. That is kind of what we're doing in tandem there, to your point, Betty. I guess the question is, how do we want to capture it in the document? I mean, we can be this verbose if we want, but I don't know. That's up for the group's just conversation, I guess. And sorry, I would say, this is what I emailed. I think you've been on this. This is what I emailed to Terry in terms of Jim and me and Terry. I would like to make it, less specific as we have the rest of the document in terms of the chair and the
right.
executive director and not
Positions and not names.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. I just copied and pasted from what I had used with Terry.
Yeah.
And thank you for pointing that out. I could not see that on my screen until now. So I didn't see any of those notes before. They were not on my screen. So thank you.
So can I think this process is really important and that we do have some, at least a general outline to it. And I do feel that, and one of the reasons I think it is important is because the board development committee could take this process and, as they're looking for future chairs, use that to help understand at some of those responsibilities that the chair has, and how, especially if we could put a little bit of a timeline to it, about what the timeline might be. Because when a chair comes on very quickly, and things might be happening very fast. And so having that sort of a general outline that the board development committee could share, and then, a little bit of a timeline. And I know the state may change their timeline about how they do evaluations, and that process. So if we went back to that 3.4, then I think we could say one of the chair's responsibilities is to work with the F&A program manager to complete the executive director's annual evaluation. And then somewhere else in the document, when you go over to that other place, if you're, one of the responsibilities of the chair to F&A is for them to work together to be able to complete that process. So that's an expectation that both sides would have.
Betty has her hand up, and then so Sarah also has her hand up. So I think Sarah, you were next, I believe, and then I heard somebody else.
Yeah, I was going to say, I would advocate against adding something that detailed into this document, because this is a document between FNA and the commission as it is this current moment, to clear up those pain points rather than to teach a new chair how to be the chair of the commission.
Well, then,
And I think we need to get back kind of on track of getting to the points that we need to work through as FNA and as the commission in order to get to a place where we can continue to conduct business as we continue through. But I think ironing out every little detail for what each person does could change tomorrow. And then we'd have to come back and redo it again. So I would advise against adding any additional timelines.
are you saying that we don't need 3.4 and 3.5?
I think that's important because it outlines what's expected from FNA, what FNA expects from the chair of the commission. We do not expect the director to sit down and walk through the timeline. I think we can do that when a new chair comes on, but that's not the purpose of the MOU. I think we're drifting away from what the intent of the MOU is.
Sorry, Tracy, I don't want to speak for you, but I see you're muted. Sarah, I think she meant we can share some of that detail with the board development committee as they're onboarding a new chair. So we can kind of take that as a offline task. I do think adding a bullet here in terms of the chair's responsibilities that does tie back nicely to 4.9 is what Jim is typing on the screen, is working with our leadership to understand and conduct the performance steps throughout the performance cycle. And I say it that way, Tracy, only editing what you said because it is more than just the annual evaluation. There's 2 interim check-ins throughout the year that I think it's really good to get that feedback from the chair. And since we struck outlined in EO 55, because that is not in EO 55, I'm comfortable adding that as a bullet. And especially since it ties back to 4.9. Sarah, do you have different thoughts? I can see your face.
I think it's captured in section 4. I don't think it's necessary under the expectations under the chair for the purposes of the MOU. And I think that is kind of in line with the conversations we've had.
I don't disagree. I'm trying to find a middle ground. If that, Terry, you're the current chair, does that, where do you, I mean, taking what Tracy has said as some of her feedback, where do you land in capturing that as a component of where we've had some gray space?
And 2 things I'm thinking about, and I'm basing this on not only my experience, but also previous chair experiences that has been shared with me. So first of all, I like what Jim typed in. I was curious about the actual numbers that go into the performance evaluation. If the designated leadership from FNA is the only person that puts those numbers in, and the only way that I'm working with that designated leadership is through feedback. It's not formally, officially on the evaluation that, for example, let's say there's a section that talks about working with staff members, and you give Jim a 5 and I say, no, it's a 3. It would be kind of in the middle. We don't do that, right? You're the one who, or the designated leadership, I'm sorry, is the person who completes the performance evaluation. And then I give feedback. That was a problem with previous chairs.
Yeah, and again, that's where I come back to not to be so hard and fast, but they're state employees and it's a state process and we own that process from end to end. And I feel like we are, I want to say, coming to the table to solicit the feedback and incorporate that and take it into consideration. But at the end of the day, we still own the process.
But yeah, I mean, if I could, not being one of the 2 people in that, I would think that we would have kind of conversations around recommendations and hear both sides and landing on, yes, does FNA reserve final say, but, as we're working through and receiving feedback, it's bi-directional in a perfect world, I think. So.
Okay. I did not understand the process until I came in as chair, so I have not had a problem working with Adam at all. And I think it would be good if we put in here back up to that statement that you just added, Jim. My suggestion would be, work with F&A designated leadership on the performance evaluation of F&A program director. We're not spelling it out exactly what that looks like, but if we get someone other than Adam who says, all I want to know is to hear your opinion, should it be spelled out what that working relationship looks like in terms of the performance evaluation, or is it okay to just have it stated just like it is right here?
I'd be comfortable with adding something about in collaboration or in conjunction through conversation, something like that. But I'll
Me
almost
too.
wonder if that's better in 4.9.
It looks like it based on what was already there.
Yeah,
That it
in the
probably,
comments.
like this kind of just says
High
that you're
level.
gonna, high level, the chair's gonna work with. And I left it kind of vague because we do want it to, like, if I could put assistant commissioner, but if that changes in the future, then we would have to go in and change this. But so whoever's designated by F&A to be the supervisor would work with the chair on the evaluation. That's high level. And then going back to the this is perhaps where something here it could be added. I don't know what it would be, but something perhaps performance evaluation and rating. I don't know if that does it, if that's maybe too simple.
How do you feel about that, Adam?
Yeah, I don't think that. Yeah, I'm good with that. I'll also wonder, I mean, this is probably a conversation for another day, but some of that may be captured in that comment. And again, this might be going back to some of Tracy's stuff, finding that balance of what from this comment needs to be pulled over, if anything, in terms of kind of the process of how I'm getting regular feedback from the chair and how I'm incorporating that versus what we're just comfortable in not stating, whereas this is kind of more of that flow of how all of that happens, not initially when it happens, but how it happens and at what step it happens at.
Right. I do think we have to be very careful and not, and be very aware that, well, you're giving direction and working with the executive director that, and this is, I think, very hard to do and can be very subtle at times, but F&A, the commission can only change the commission processes. And that F&A should not be able to change the commission processes through performance reviews. And I think that is very subtle, but I think we have to be very careful that doesn't happen. We're only attached to F&A administratively, but our mandate comes down from the governor's office to the commission and not to F&A. So I think I think we have to be very, very thoughtful in that. That if the commission decides to make a change or the chair decides to make some kind of change, that comes through the commission, not through F&A, through performance plans to the executive director.
Okay, Adam,
Can you
have to be-
specify what you mean there?
Well, let's say I don't know, somebody says, I, um, I don't like, I don't like the dates that were set. And you don't set the dates. The executive director doesn't set the dates correctly based on FNA's, whatever FNA wants. But the commission sets their own dates. The commission, the chair assigns their own committee chairs. The commission decides on the committees that it wants to have, or combining committees, or if something's efficient or inefficient with the commission, that's not for FNA to decide. That's the commission itself to decide that commission business. And and it is, I think we need to be thoughtful about that, because it can go down a road that all of a sudden that we see FNA directing the executive director to change things about the commission because it's in its staff review. And I haven't seen Jim's review, so I don't know if there's anything in there. I'm just saying that that's something that I think we need to be careful of.
Yeah, and I think that that's where there continues to be gray space of, in terms of how we provide feedback for the staff to be managed, or the operations of the team or stuff like that, as long as it is not direct commission business, FNA would have, through that administrative support, because the office is attached to us, it is a part of FNA, we would have purview over that. So I guess I'm struggling a bit, because I don't know if you have a specific example in mind, or if we're talking in generalities of something we want to avoid. But I do, to that point, I think, and I've shared this with Terry, that is something that we have to consider, because FNA still does manage this team. It's not just administratively attached. And I think that that's where the gray space has been, is the thought that FNA is just here to provide space and laptops and copies. That's not accurate. And that's, I think, what needs to be clarified in this document.
I will have to say that my viewpoint of FNA is not that they just provide space and copies. Okay, they do a whole lot more than that, and I think we all know that, and we understand that, and we value the expertise, and have valued it for a long time, the expertise that and the wisdom that FNA brings when commission has questions, and doing things and being able to do the mission that we've been assigned to do. So, awesome people there. But you don't want something to, if the chair has something about the commission that says the executive director is, we ask the executive director to sign these meetings at 11 o'clock for Zoom, and the executive director is not doing those things that the chair has asked, then, that's where that, or if the executive or if the chair wants to change committee assignments or whatever, but at the same time, that should come from the chair in the evaluations, that business comes from the chair. If and not that it somehow manages its way to sneak into FNA's evaluation of the chair, that forces the executive director to do something so that his evaluation will be on the positive. for FNA, and that forces him to change or to manipulate the chair and how the commission does business to be able to get those evaluations. And I don't know Jim's evaluation. I know it when I did it years ago, but that's all I know. And so I don't have anything specific that I can point to, but I do think we need to be careful with that. So I do think, you know, when we talk about the process of combining ever how we want to combine the evaluations between FNA and the chair, you know, the chair should keep their, I mean, she's not going to put evaluations in to try to make the executive director to change things in FNA. That her thing is from her perspective as the chair, and the commission, and not FNA. And I'm just afraid, I just think I think we just need to avoid that. And that if the chair thinks that there's something in that evaluation that's being directed at the executive director instead of at the chair, because that's where those changes come from for the commission.
So
The chair.
I told Jim, I apologize, I'm gonna have to step out a little early. I'm not getting up and leaving the conversation, not walking away from the table. I am gonna have to drop a little bit early, but it sounds like we might be talking about last year when we added the survey component to the subcommittees. And Amy felt that that was commission business. To rip the Band-Aid off, is that what we're talking about?
I don't know. I don't know anything about the evaluation. I just, you know, this is a complex thing, and Jim's job, or the executive director's, pardon me, Jim, the executive director's position is very complex. And he does have two bosses, unfortunately. I mean, no matter how you look at it, he has the chair and the commission, which he works for, and that's his, you know, primary responsibility. I mean, I know that technically he works for the state, but his position is there to do the business of Volunteer Tennessee. And those commission things, to change things about the commission, if we're going to have commission changes, if I think that we're doing something wrong in the commission, or I don't like the way we do a meeting or something, it's not to go to FNA and to say, hey, I think we're doing this all wrong. It's me to speak to the chair and say, hey, I think this is wrong. So same with FNA. If FNA thinks the commission is doing something wrong, that shouldn't show up in an executive director's evaluation, because that has to do with what they think the commission should or should not be doing. That should be in a discussion with the chair, and not with the executive director, because there's some things the executive director cannot control.
Well, so, and I don't, I'm not in the weeds of how y'all operate, but just playing on hypothetical, since we spent the last 20 minutes on a hypothetical that I'm still not sure what we're talking about. But let me sort of play out what you were going down, and where I think something might fall into an evaluation. There's certain laws and rules around meetings, for example, since you were given a meeting example, that the state has to follow. Let's say the chair says, Jim, I want you to schedule a meeting for tomorrow, and push that out. Well, there's open meeting laws and things like that. If Jim does that, we expect Jim to advise the chair and the commission of everything related to its business. If Jim does not do that, then yes, it will show up in Jim's evaluation. Jim doesn't just blatantly and blindly do whatever the chair says if it's a violation of the law. I'm being a little extreme here because I'm not really following your concern with with what we've been talking about, but, just want to say there probably is some overlap. I also think we've talked a whole lot about something that's a hypothetical that's likely not happening. But I just want to say there's probably are some opportunities for things to show up. Now, we're not going to, I don't think you'll ever see, Jim let the chair schedule a meeting on a Thursday, and F&A doesn't like Thursday meetings, that's not going to come into play. But,
I think the other thing to point out too is Jim's evaluation every year, the way that the state works, I'm assuming it's the same for FNA as it is for us at the Department of Mental Health, but we have work outcomes. And so that's what you're being evaluated on through each interim period and your final review. Those work outcomes don't change throughout the year. So they're set in July, and then that's what we're working off of. So that's what the comments and that's what the final evaluation is based off of. So I don't know if that helps clear up any of what the fear is, but that work outcome is it's a work outcome and then activities that follow that work outcome that align with that. So I'm not sure if that's helpful at all either.
I just want to make a note. It is 12:58. I don't want to, I want to be respectful of your time. We have
Yeah, so we are running short on time. I think, Terry, if I'm not mistaken, it sounded like everybody was okay with the addition to 3.4 of that last bullet point.
mhm.
And if that's the case, then I think probably the next time we pick up, it would be with 3.5 and restarting there.
I agree.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
Maybe one scratch.
Jim, you'll send out a doodle poll for us for our next meeting, and hopefully we can get through, work on finishing up 3.
Yeah, and it would probably be good for everyone to review the rest of the document so everyone
Yes.
knows what's in it,
Mhm.
so that we're able to move through it a little faster.
I think these conversations are such that we've been needing to have. So I apologize if it seems a little, overboard for you guys, but I think we want to just make sure that we're clear on this relationship and how it works together, how we work together. So,
Jim, I have a quick
okay.
question. Do you have an estimated timeline of how many more meetings you want to have on this? Or Terry?
Yeah, I think that's a question for Terry. But I think someone has.
Yeah, I really had hoped, we could have gotten a little bit further today, but I do think we had some important things to talk about. I'm thinking maybe two more meetings.
2 more? Okay.
And we appreciate you, being here, Sarah. I
No,
know
of course, I am trying to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. It's 1:01. I want to thank everybody for being here today, and we'll continue our conversation at our next meeting. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.